Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday morning. Hope everyone is doing well. Don't forget, this is the last week that you can schedule that spring heating and air tune-up with Blue Water Climate Control and get registered for those 2-season tickets to all of Tennessee's home football games. Refer a friend and you increase your chances to win as well. The drawing is going to be held on April 26th. You can call 865-299-2290 or go to Blue Water Climate Control to schedule your appointment today. And then remember, Blue Water Climate Control is saying thank you to all the Volquest subscribers out there and listeners out there who have been so loyal and so good to them as they have been. The Volquest has been the top referral site for Blue Water Climate Control. To find out more about what all Blue Water Climate Control can do for you, including the right repair the right way the first time, give them a call, 865-299-2290. With Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Plenty to get to on this edition of the podcast. We'll start, obviously, with some football, and the biggest news coming out of football is that Tennessee is going to take a transfer quarterback. Not a surprise. We've been talking about Joe Milton on and off for a couple of months now, but as Austin noted and reported on Monday, he has been in Knoxville and is registered in school at Tennessee. We'll start classes this spring. Rob, I'll start with you. What's your takeaway from the fact that Tennessee is indeed just taking another quarterback in the out of the transfer portal?
I mean, I think it says a great deal about what, the staff thinks about what they have in the quarterback room right now. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was the tipping point on Saturday scrimmage. That might be reading a little too much into that, but I know I've talked to a couple people, who were there, or who talked to people who were there who, were pretty negative on the quarterback. So to me, this says more about Tennessee's quarterbacks room than it does Milton, or at least what the coaches think they have in that room.
Rob,
go ahead, Rob. I was going to say, I think Tennessee had 8 consecutive 3-and-outs at one point in Saturday's scrimmage, is what I was told. I don't think that Joe Milton was coming long before Saturday's scrimmage. So, this has been done. I don't think this is any kind of surprise. I think the quarterbacks in that room knew that they were taking somebody, Brent. I don't think that the coaches pulled any punches with that. I think they were upfront about it with those guys. And so, I don't think they're shocked either. Brian Maurer can have his silly, vague tweets and stuff that he's done since he's been here. That's part of the reason he doesn't play. I know somebody said in the chat that I've been down on Maurer. I think it's not being down on Maurer. I just think it's part of the maturing process. Like you can't ride the wave of good play, bad play like he does and expect to be able to get on the field. I think if he could level out things, even when he has bad plays, that it's the emotional roller coaster that he rides. Whereas Harrison Bailey is much more even keel. High plays, he never gets too high. Low plays, he doesn't really get too low. He almost just, he almost has no pulse out there at times.
Well, and I think when you look at Brian Maurer specifically, I think he's probably, for this offense, maybe the most talented guy Tennessee has, and is the most talented guy Tennessee has in the room.
Throws a great ball, man.
He's just the most inconsistent guy that they have in the room, and the least dependable on the field. I'm not talking about off the field. I'm just talking about on the field, because it's good one minute, it's bad the next minute. It's just we're grossly inconsistent. Is this just a case where you Austin, I think you've mentioned this in a couple of podcasts, so I'll get both of your opinions. Is this just a case you have to get this position right, and if that means you take and you keep taking until you find one, you just keep taking until you find somebody?
Yeah, I 100% think that that's what you have to do. Like if you take 2 more, they're not doing that. But I mean, if you had to, that's what you do. I mean, you can't take a step forward as a program and without fixing that position. I really believe that. I mean, it is so quarterback driven, across football in general, but especially at this level, that you've got to have somebody that you can depend on. I mean, just look at Tennessee's quarterback play the last 15 years, Brent. I mean, even 15 years ago, when the quarterback play is solid, Tennessee's football program is on much more steady and stable ground. When it's not, it's basically earthquake city, and there's faults and tremors and all kinds of things going on that cause things to not be steady and stable.
Rob, is it a case where in the world of sport that quarterback across the board in really any sport is the most important position? And what I mean by that is you can win in basketball without the best point guard, without a great point guard. You can get by with a point forward. You know, in baseball, you can piecemeal some pitching together. You don't have to have the best hitter. You know, you don't have to be great. I mean, to be successful in football at any level is the bottom line. You have to have a quarterback, making that position the most valuable position in all of sport.
I don't think it's even close. I'm not an expert in soccer or cricket or some of these other sports, but I just don't think it's close when you're talking about a guy who has the ball in his hand on every single possession. Yeah, I mean, you say that about the center too, but that does not compare. I mean, and unless he's handing the ball off, he's making decisions that are going to affect the outcome of the game. And even if he is handing the ball off, he's made a decision before the snap on whether to stay in that play that was called from the sideline, whether to get into something else. I mean, if you want to see how valuable they are, just look at the NFL draft this year and what teams are giving up to get into that one of those top 3 spots where they could take a quarterback that they want. I mean, they're giving up, multiple first round draft picks, other picks in the draft. I mean, there's no clear illustration of that, of how valuable it is than what NFL franchises are willing to do to just get a chance at getting the right guy. I mean, it's not a guarantee.
And we'll see if Tennessee's got the right guy. We'll see what Joe Milton can do. We'll see what that quarterback competition looks like. He comes in tall, a big, thick guy with a big arm. And we know that Tennessee wants to get the ball vertical down the field. And we'll see what he can do this summer. The other question is who's going to stay and who's not going to stay. We'll see. I don't think everybody ends up staying. And obviously, Caden Salter did not have the opportunity to go through spring practice, so that set him back significantly. You don't have any idea where he could potentially be at. Not that anybody thought he was going to be a starter this fall, but you don't know where he's at from a competition standpoint. And again, what does that look like? If Hendon Hooker were to leave, he has to transfer down. So he is in some ways stuck, if you will, if he wants to stay at the Power 5 level. Anybody else can be free to go if they want to go. So we'll see what happens post spring practice. If any of those guys make a decision, any of those other guys make a decision to go, and we'll see what this competition looks like once Tennessee gets into the summertime. All right, let's shift here to the spring game, and I got a couple of questions to ask here. One, are you looking for either for both of you guys? Are you looking for anything specific in a spring game on Saturday?
I mean,
no.
Just to watch the quarterbacks again. I mean, I don't know that you can make any dramatic conclusions based off the spring game that's going to be managed and controlled. But I mean, just to try and get a feel for if there's any pecking order there as they leave spring.
Well,
he lines up at linebacker and winger.
I just say no because I think the last major scrimmage, which was last Saturday, was the last real kind of litmus test for Josh Heupel and company. I don't think they're going to put a whole lot of stock into anything that happens Saturday. The spring games are so fan oriented and, just don't show anybody anything and play it very vanilla across the board, both defensively and offensively. So I go no. I mean, I guess if you ask me to lean anything, it would be offensive line. What does Dane Davis look like as he continues his growth? I don't. Cade is not going to be partaking. What's Darnell Wright look like? What do they look like from guard to guard?
So that brings me to this question. Florida did not have a spring game this year. They decided that back in February because of COVID and everything else. They just elected not to have a spring game. Saturday, there's, I think, 5 spring games in the SEC. They're all streamed. None of them are on, none of them are on any of the ESPN real motherships. They're on the Plus or they're on the streaming deal. Last week, Alabama had their game on ESPN. They're the only ones to have theirs on anything like that. Is the end of spring games coming? I mean, are we going to get to a point that there's just not going to be, and that there's no need for a spring game? I mean, look, because here's the thing. I mean, right now, if you're the SEC network, you're going to carry a spring game, or are you going to carry a baseball series game between 2 top 10 baseball teams?
All I know, AP, is if it is the end of it, it's going to be a sad day in the Hubbard's life. Nobody loves a spring game more than Brent Hubbs.
Oh yeah, but in all seriousness,
I agree with you.
I mean, I just wonder if, because for years you've heard, well, it's they're doing a TV thing. Everybody's looking for the TV exposure. But if it's only going to be in a streaming type deal, and Florida's, didn't do it, and they used COVID as their reasoning this year, are we going to move towards a trend where there is no, quote, real spring game anymore? Because everybody's doing them. And I mean, Tennessee doesn't even have a format as of Monday for what the spring game is going to look like. Are they going to go full scrimmage? Are they going to do a bunch of drill stuff?
What's the point
right?
System?
I mean, we've seen it done a million different ways. My point is, are we getting to a point where that they're becoming so irrelevant that you just turn that last practice into a practice and be done with it?
I agree with you, except for one thing. I wonder if coaches don't want to keep them for recruiting purposes, for a reason to bring in a bunch of guys and have them inside the stadium.
That I agree with that point. I think from a sponsorship standpoint, for universities, that the ability to have it, branded a certain thing, and then I just don't think we'll go that route. I think you'll see some tweaks. I think what the Big Ten did, if you saw on Monday night, Illinois had their spring game on Monday night. I think that would be way more interesting if Tennessee's orange and white game was on a Thursday night, instead of a Saturday at 4:00. That's just my
might help
opinion.
you with TV.
Might help you with TV. It's not going to help you with attendance on a Thursday night. I mean, I don't think I think you're more likely to get somebody to drive in. Look, here's the thing. If you don't have the fan day deal where you're doing a bunch of autographs and all those things, what is the purpose of a spring game anymore? Because from a recruiting standpoint, it's a closed scrimmage. As long as it's a regular recruit, it's not a dead period like it is now. You can bring those guys to any scrimmage you want to. You don't need a spring game for that. You can roll them in there. And I guess you could say, well, you got a crowd there, but I mean, how many kids are basing a decision on the fact that they had X number of fans at a spring game? I just think if you don't have that fan element, I don't know kind of what the point of them is anymore, because it doesn't feel like coaches have much use for them.
Well, they don't. Yeah, and you're right. I do think that there's something to be said for bringing prospects in around fans, because listen, if you don't think that a 17-year-old kid is impressionable when he rolls into any stadium and fan from that school is like, oh, Bobby, can I have your picture or whatever? Like that, to me, that really isn't very much something that kids really gravitate towards. More so than it's more than just seeing, oh yeah, Tennessee had 35,000 fans here, or Georgia had 42,000 fans here, or whatever. But I think when the fans are knowledgeable and they know these prospects and stuff, I think that has an impact.
Okay, interesting.
You're right. It is dying, but newspapers are dying, and yet they're still a newspaper. I think you're slow. It's just a slow death for spring games. If it is a death, so to speak, I think you just constantly see tweaks and less people care by the year about going to them. But I think you're right. I don't think it's one of those things where, there's going to be enough people that do it that people aren't going to, go, well, we're done. I think Florida will go back to it. I think it was just a convenient out this year due to COVID.
Well, it's definitely that. I'm just curious to see kind of what the follow-up from that is, and we'll see what the tweaks are. Again, I think the fan day element to it, if it's there, then I think there's merit to it. But if you keep going away from those things and they're not a part of that, then I'm not sure how relevant those things are going to be. But Tennessee has their orange and white game on Saturday. They will practice twice this week, and so we'll have coverage of that coming up later today, and coverage of that on Thursday as well. Then we'll have full coverage of the orange and white game on Saturday in whatever format that's going to be at, and put a bow tie on Josh Heupel's first spring as they get ready to go through their summer off-season program and go from there. All right, Rob, let's turn to hoops before we'll close it out with a couple of recruiting things, but let's turn to hoops right quick. because they've made more news than anybody else has. The last, other than the baseball team, they've made more news than anybody else has the last few days since we last did this. Let's start first with the fact that John Fulkerson is back. And I want to get your thoughts there, but I want to put it in this context. Fulkerson was on Vol Calls Monday night. I asked him specifically about his moment after the Florida game at midcourt, or at the end of the Florida game at midcourt when he left, and he was obviously emotional. And he said on the show, he said, I was gone. I was leaving. My plan had been, I wanted to beat Florida in my final game wearing a Tennessee jersey, and I was out the door. And then the injury thing happened, and I didn't want to go out like that. What do you think it means that John Fulkerson is back, and are you surprised that he's back?
No, put it in the war room pretty strongly last Thursday night, and I think I'm not the only person probably in town that heard that, but had heard pretty strongly last Thursday night that he was going to be announcing, and soon. I didn't know it was necessarily going to be Friday. But I think it's big for Tennessee. I think that the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of last week for Tennessee were as good as things have ever been for this program in recruiting. When you talk about just a 3-day stretch, getting Jonas Adu, getting Brandon Huntley Hatfield, and then having a guy who's been a second-team All-SEC performer opt to come back. And, I think it's tremendous. I get it. Fans are going to be more excited about these highly ranked freshmen. But I think Fulke coming back is just as big as getting those two guys. We saw with freshmen this past year, no matter how talented, if you're leaning on them every single night, you're going to have, it's going to be a roller coaster. So I think getting a veteran back like Fulke was big. And I think it's also huge that because of those two freshmen, it's going to make life for him easier. He's not going to get double teamed every time down the floor like he was last year. He's not going to get banged around and be the focal point of somebody else's scout when it comes to Tennessee's inside offense, because if they do, they're going to get burnt. In Huntley Hatfield in particular, ID's a good player, a really good prospect, legit 7-footer, but Huntley Hatfield is way more polished offensively right now, and he's got a lot of parts to his game for a 6'9", 6'10" kid that's 18 years old. And he like any freshman, he's going to have some off nights, but he's going to come in with a toolkit that is going to immediately show up on offense. And to me, everything just fits. On paper. Now, maybe things won't work out this way, but you got the point guard, Kenny Chandler, is electric. You got a shooter to space the floor, and Justin Powell. And, if Victor Bailey can find some consistency, you could put two of them out there at the same time. And Chandler can shoot it. He's not prolific, but you got to guard him. And then you got the three bigs if you count Fulke, and a jack of all trades, a Josiah James, that is going to give Rick Barnes a lot of options.
I think it's terrific too, Rob. But Play It Again Sports has a really good deal on used golf clubs. You're only allowed 14 in your bag, and we look forward to publicizing your long-awaited return to the links. Some point in the very, 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 very near future.
Have you heard what kind of shape is Oakland Hills in right now? Do you know?
It's Oakmont.
Oakmont, excuse me. That's yours.
Wait, listen. I can make a call. We go down to Atlanta Athletic Club. I can get Rick. I think we're going to get Rick Barnes in on this round of golf. I think that's definitely happening. We might even go down to the Austin Country Club. Make a trip down to see his grandkids. Go down there where they play the World Accenture Match Play. I think that might be where we go. Billy Horschel, a Gator.
What's the name of the course? What's the name of the course? Tom Kite owns. I know Rick's buddies with him.
Tom Kite.
I don't know, but Tom Kite
has one, and Ben Crenshaw has one.
Rob, I thought you were holding out that the part of the bet was the only place you would play was in Talbot, Tennessee, at Lost Creek. Other than that, you weren't going to participate.
They're closed, Tubbs. They're closed.
Dead horse. No love for dead horse.
So we'll see. We might live stream that one if that ever happens.
Hey, T, what was the little 9-hole course? It was basically in a field in Morristown back in the day.
But Oscars.
Yes, Oscars.
Wow.
Oscars.
A reference to Oscars. It's been a long time since I've heard that one. Fulkerson also said this, and he never made an excuse, and I know Rick didn't make an excuse, but he talked about how he would be better next year for a lot of reasons. He thought the team would be better because they would have better, kind of better chemistry because they get to be around each other in the off season, which they weren't this year. But he talked about how he never really got his win back after COVID, and that was a concern for him. How different of a player do you think John Fulkerson will be next year? One, because A, he's healthier, and if he can stay healthy, and two, because of what you mentioned earlier, he's going to have help around him. He won't be the focal point of the post.
I really hope that that's accurate, and that would make sense. That would explain a lot if Fulky really had COVID fatigue, which I think has been the reality for some people. I don't think that's an excuse. I think a lot of athletes have kind of dealt with that, and if you get 2019, 2020 Fulky back, that's a big deal for this team. And I just don't think he ever approached – he never at any point in time this year looked like the guy that went into at the end of 2020 and dropped 27 on Kentucky and leading Tennessee to a road win in Lexington, which is, you guys both know that's a rare thing.
Yeah.
No, I don't think he was ever there.
Yeah, it certainly didn't look like it. All right, my last hoops question, then we'll get a couple of recruiting things here as we get out the door. Kennedy Chandler is a 5-star point guard that we think Rick Barnes really loves. We know how Rick Barnes managed the two freshmen this year, particularly early in the year. It was a little bit of a spoon-fed type deal, and he had a pretty quick leash for some of those guys. Does he handle BHH and Kennedy Chandler any different than he handled Springer and Keon Johnson, either A, because of their skill set or because of need, Rob? Does he manage those guys, you think, differently next year? Or is it a case where those two guys are going to be further along because they get a full summer development that those other two guys did not have because of the COVID restriction stuff?
Yeah, I think that last part is a really big key because I think Rick went into November last year ready to roll with the freshmen and, endure some growing pains. And then I think when they had to shut it down for almost 2 weeks and cancel 4 games and kind of delay their development, I think he got gun shy. I think looking back on what we just saw this last season, how ridiculous is it that Keon Johnson was not a day one starter, that Jaden Springer wasn't a day one starter? I think that's where you see him be different. I'll be stunned if Kennedy Chandler doesn't have the ball in his hands when Tennessee opens play next season. And I wouldn't guarantee that BHH and is going to start. One of those two is not going to start, him or I do. I think BHH is more likely. I think this past year of going through it with Keon and Jaden, I think at least early Rick will give them a little longer leash and let them play through some mistakes. Now, I'm not saying that he might go into games with that idea, and I'm not saying his head might not explode when he sees Kennedy throw one into the 5th row or something and he jerks it. But I think his intent will be to give them a longer leash early in the season so that it benefits them late.
All right. Go ahead, Austin.
I was just going to say, to keep with with the letters going, will CRB be able to coach KC in a way that's not like JB a couple of years ago where he pushes him too hard. To me, that's interesting. Is how hard he pushed Jordan Bone, and how he's gonna coach Kennedy Chandler. Is it going to be the exact same, or will it'll be similar? I'm positive, but will it have some tweaks to it, Rob? Because we all remember how he pushed Bone when he first got here.
Well, I think, I don't pretend to be these kids' best friends or all, but I've been around both of them, and I think Kennedy is set up mentally to take it more so than the other one was.
All right, Rob, let's look at this roster here. It is with the transfer portal, and I know you got some questions in the chat about it on Monday night. What's left in the portal? What's out there that Tennessee could be involved in? Are they done? Is there a reclassification of anybody else left at this point, or where do you think Rick Barnes and his newly revamped staff is with finishing out this roster?
I think that the Tamba reclassification and being a take is a very, very real thing. But then based off conversations I had as recently as Monday night, I don't think there's a guy in the portal right now that Tennessee is chasing. I do think that if a big were to enter an experienced big, not just a 6'11" kid who was athletic and hadn't done anything, like if an experienced big with a track record of success entered the portal, I think Tennessee would chase him aggressively. But as of today, that's the only thing I think they would go after.
And you don't think they're going to go after another guard or a shooter? You think they're
not based off what I've heard on Monday night. Maybe somebody who that might change if somebody enters the portal that's not there now.
Gotcha.
But as of right now, I don't think so.
For me, it's interesting, Brent, just looking at like they just got to do, and they got Huntley Hatfield. If they take Hanjay Tamba and then go with another big, that's basically like closing out the class with almost 4 bigs, right, Rob?
Yeah, but Tamba is in no way, if he ends up here, total red shirt.
Oh yeah, super project, yes.
Total developmental project. But I think you'll see Rick going forward. If he takes a kid who's definitely a project, it's going to be a 7-footer. It's not going to be a Devontae Gaines. I don't think you're going to see much more of that.
Gotcha. And obviously, he's made it very clear at the end of the season they were going to get back to the right kind of post play. And obviously, they have struggled mightily with their recruiting of post players. They just not enough guys have panned out in terms of posts they've recruited. So we'll see what happens if they add anybody else, to this roster, or a couple more pieces. We'll see what happens.
But man, what a makeover! I mean,
it's crazy. I mean,
to add Justin Powell, the 2 freshmen coming in and get Fulke back. I mean, it's incredible how much different the roster.
And then you look at the makeover he's had on his staff. I mean, what they've gotten done in 2.5 weeks. What Rick Barnes has done in 2.5 weeks is pretty crazy with his roster and his staff to turn it the way they have, to the point that there's great excitement about where this team is and where this program is at, because let's face it, 2 weeks ago, a lot of people were wondering, now all of a sudden they're going to be back on the forefront of all the national commentators.
And tip of the cap to Coach Barnes, because I mean, this is basically the kind of thing. I mean, this environment that we're in right now with the transfers and everything being so uncertain. I mean, I think a lot of people would agree it pretty much drove Roy Williams from the game.
No question.
Maybe a year earlier or 2 years earlier than he wanted to. And Rick's just rolled up his sleeves and embraced it. He's like, I'm not done. I'm not tired of coaching. If this is what it is, it's what it is. We'll do the best I can at it.
Yeah, I mean, to say Roy Williams was obsessed with the transfer portal and the idea of guys just being able to leave is an understatement from everybody you talk to over there. That was a daily conversation. The fact that kids could just walk and we're going to be able to walk. He just could not get his hands around having to roster manage that way. And Rick Barnes has talked about it for a couple of months now. That's just the way college basketball and college athletics is becoming. And as you said, Rob, he has reached out and embraced it. And as a result, he's done a complete 180 makeover of his basketball team heading into next year. All right, let's talk a little football recruiting as we finish up this edition of the Blue Water Climate Control podcast. Austin, you talked about maybe Tennessee would like to get one more, or you think that it'd be good for them to get one more before June 1st opens up. I don't know if that's possible, but it's interesting. Tennessee pretty aggressive this past week with some Zoom calls to some individuals, and then obviously they had kind of that virtual junior day with some guys that at least they're highly interested in. I don't know how many offers were involved there, but some guys that not just 22s but 23s, even 24s, trying to get an early jump on those guys, right?
That's right. I mean, they've been Zooming a lot with certain kids in state, some out of state kids. They're still set to bring in a ton of kids in the month of June. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I mean, I think Addison Nichols is now going to visit in the month of June. A guy like Joshua Josephs, Tennessee's going to get his first official visit, so it's going to be important for Tennessee to knock that one out of the park. And let's face it, they'll be better the third week of June than they were the first week of June when it comes to official visits. I mean, you hadn't hosted anybody in over a year, and this staff's never hosted anybody at Tennessee. So learning how you do an official visit here. I mean, I get there are people in the building that have done it, and I know that these guys have done it at other places, but understanding how an official visit will work at Tennessee is, it'll be a little bit different. So, for me, I think that this staff is still trying to get their footing. In a perfect world, they could get one more before June. I'm with you. I think that's going to be a stretch. The guys in state that they're closest with, a guy like Caden Pope, I think probably July at the earliest for him. And then a guy like, Cam Miller's not going to go anything till the summertime at the earliest. Giovanni Davis. I mean, I don't want to totally close the door on that one, but he's told me he doesn't feel like he's super close, but Tennessee's still in a really good spot along with Ole Miss.
Yeah, and if you're a kid, if you wait a couple more weeks, why not wait till June? You can go see those guys in person, and see everything in person. It just to me it makes a lot of sense at that point, just to kind of wait, because I'm not sure anybody's going to lose their spot if they wait until June 1st to see somebody in play. So Austin, any chance they got anybody here this weekend, or is that just probably not? I know they can't talk to them, they can't visit with them, but you think anybody makes the trip over here to see the spring game, or is that just really those types of visits are kind of unrealistic right now, as everybody's trying to set their schedule for June and see as much as they can see in the month of June?
No, I think they'll have some people here. I think Caden Pope's, he's told me he's slated to be here. Cam Miller told me that, if his 7-on-7 team doesn't play this weekend, that he may come over for a visit to Tennessee. So, I can see Isaiah Horton making it over with Cam, if that is the case, if their 7-on-7 team does not play. So, I think Tennessee may have some kids here this weekend. Mo Clipper, Maurice Clipper, I think, could be here this weekend. So, yeah, I think there's a possibility that Tennessee ends up with a handful of kids here. And you would expect that, I think, with it being a Saturday, 4:00, it's plenty enough time for kids to drive in the day of and come see, Tennessee play for an hour and a half or whatever.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens and kind of where recruiting goes from here. It also is going to be interesting, Austin, to see if Tennessee can find anything in the transfer portal. Obviously, we know about the quarterback situation with Joe Milton. Do they find a linebacker? Is there a linebacker out there? You referenced the kid from Western Kentucky.
Ricky Barber.
As maybe a possibility, somebody keep an eye on. I think the kid from Texas is a long shot. Maybe I'm wrong, but that just feels like a long shot to me.
Well, that's one they're putting a bunch of time into, Brent. He's been on multiple Zooms with them. So they're in it enough to get steady dialogue. Now, how in it are they? I don't know. I've not really talked to the kid. He's kind of been laying low, for the last couple of weeks. So, we'll see. But I think you're right. You said it in the chat, and I think you're right. For Tennessee to land him, he'll need to come see this place. I don't think he's going to go pick a school that he's not been to before.
Hubbard, they need to make sure he knows what a great track record Tennessee historically has had with kids out of Texas.
Well, they've had some success with some kids out of Texas. They've probably not had as much as they would like.
They've gotten some really good ones, or beaten some people out, but they haven't really developed.
Yeah, some of those haven't panned out for sure. But Tennessee, I think, Austin, if you're looking at a transfer, to me, it's linebacker or bust. Maybe an offensive tackle. I'd be a little surprised if they go after Max Ray at this point, but maybe an offensive tackle. But linebacker or bust for me in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of it depends on, where you feel like you're at on the offensive line. What do you feel like Dane Davis can give you? What, how far does Darnell Wright come along? Cade Mays is going to be the Swiss Army knife of this offensive line. He's going to start somewhere. It may be a different location every week, but,
I was going to say, I bet he starts 3 or 4 places this year.
Yeah, he's just going to be wherever they need him. He'll be again, and that'll be if he has a really good senior year, him bouncing around like that is going to be proving a lot of wealth for his NFL stock. So, that's why the offensive line, like, to go back to the board what you asked right out of the gate, interesting to see how that group pans out. But I do think that if Tennessee were to go that route, they need to go with somebody they know can get on the field, not just a warm body.
Yeah, no doubt. If you're going to take a transfer, it's somebody you think is going to come in and be on the field. I don't care what position it is, but that's definitely needs to be the case with the transfer portal if you're going to use a scholarship. All right, that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast. For Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.